Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are joined by Santina Rigano-Lesch. She is a confidence maven, dance and body love coach, and biz mentor who owns a second business helping Fempreneurs in the done-for-you services space. It's called Don't Do It Yourself Virtual Assistant Services. We are really psyched about what Santina is doing in the body movement space. And as it says on her Instagram page, cultivating and fostering an evolution of fierce females, unleashing and reclaiming their most in tune, confident, and badass self. Man, Santina, we are so excited to talk to you about all of this and how we too can be our badass selves. So thank you so much for being here.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Oh, I'm pumped.
Good.
So we came across all of your amazing videos on Instagram, and they were so pumped up with energy, which is awesome. So we reached out. You agreed to be on the show. You're like a sensation on Instagram. How did this all happen for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. It just made my whole heart like skip a beat. I'm like, what? Sensation? Okay, thank you.
Sensation.
I love it.
She's already got me moving.
How did that all happen? That's a great question. You know, I've been on Instagram and on social media for a very long time and trying to figure out how to essentially like share a lot of my story, a lot of how I came to the work that I'm doing. And it honestly took me a lot of diving deep into understanding what I stand for and who I stand for and what that meant for me as a brand. And so kind of like the reels that you came across are kind of like this new energy shift that I leaned into, and I'm loving it because it's just making it so much more fun and I'm enjoying it. It's taking away the pressure and I get to share about what the fuck I care about, which is empowering women. And coming from a space where growing up, I wasn't empowered in that way in many different lenses, from my weight to my body shape to being in the dance world since I was 4 and then starting teaching at the age of 18. And also being that teacher that was like very industry standard, like do it this way, blah, blah, blah. If you're not a professional dancer, you know, this sort of a vibe. I really have gone through a huge shift within myself and understanding what dance means really for the everyday woman and what it really should encompass. And I really don't like to use the word should, but I am going to in this essence, what it should encompass versus what it kind of does. And so that's kind of really what speared me to go down this path of working with women online and having them tap into loving their bodies and falling back in love with their bodies, because society just gives us fuck no's all the time. And it's hard. It's hard when you're getting fuck no's all the time, especially if you're a curvier woman, a bigger woman, even if you're not, even if you're a tinier woman. Like, we all have shit that we don't like about our bodies or shit that we're trying to accept. And so this is kind of what really pushed me to go down the path of what I'm doing now.
So for our listeners who don't know, we know because we've been watching you. What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
That's a very open-ended question. What do? I do a couple of different things. I consider myself to be multi-passionate, and I really love that because it allows me to go back and forth and do all the things that I love to do. So at the center of everything I do, I work with women on all avenues and all lenses. That's my main thing. There are plenty of people out there working with the males and all that, and they can have them. That's all well and good. I want to work with all the women because I know full well, yeah, exactly. Yep. Thank you. I know full well just how like underrated we are and how much support we haven't had. And so that's just a little bit about that. What else do I do? Okay, so I teach dance classes online through a monthly membership called Unstoppable Babes, and we meet twice a week on live classes. They're about 45, well, they're supposed to be 45 minutes long, but let's face it, I love what I do and they tend to go over. So we typically are learning choreography and a different combo each night. That allows us to essentially, like, first of all, not have to remember choreography, because let's face it, we're all adult women with a shit ton going on, and remembers. The focus though is to be able to really tap into dancing the shit out of it and finding movement that feels good within the body. So the first part of the month, we learn 4 new routines. And then the second part of the month is what I call the dance the shit out of it time, where we relearn the choreography with the emphasis on feeling good within the body. And so, for example, a move that I choreograph or teach is going to look and feel different on me than it does on you, Raquel, than it does on you, Jennifer, and everybody else. And so that's really the emphasis of Unstoppable Babes and sort of the dance coaching side. Then I also do body love and body acceptance and body safety, and really tapping into what it means to create a space within ourselves to be able to then do this inner work, because we can do the inner work, but a lot of the times we hit roadblocks because we're not ready to, the body's not ready to. And so I also do a lot of that work, and I've just recently released my Body Love Connection monthly text subscription. So there's that. I'm also a business mentor, and so I work with Fempreneurs on like creating a business that feels good within the flow for themselves. There's so many people online that just tell you, do this, do that, do that. I mean, we can listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't feel good for you and your business, it's not going to flow. And so I do a lot of work with that. And then obviously have my, like you mentioned, Raquel, my other business where I do done for you services like virtual assistants and social media management and podcast management over on that side for Fempreneurs. But really, I would say like the whole idea of Unstoppable Babes really is what like pushed me into really trying to create my brand online, I would say, and really be known for what I'm doing. I just felt like, I feel like I have a voice, a really big voice, and people need to hear it. Women need to hear it. And they need to know that they're not alone and that they're safe and they can go down this path. Within Unstoppable Babes itself, I also have the styles mix up so that we are doing a mix between embodied grooves and sensual grooves. And embodied grooves is kind of like, I mean, really whatever the song's telling me. It could be from Latino styles to hip hop styles to whatever. And it also, the sensual side of things is really about tapping in and connecting to the body. And that is something us women fucking struggle with hugely. And so, yeah, hand up there.
I'll raise my hand too.
Yeah, it's a huge struggle. And honestly, it's so empowering when you're able to embody it. The journey along the way can be challenging, but it's also so rewarding when you can feel up on your body or touch your body without having some sort of trauma response or some sort of like, oh, what, you know, that kind of a feel. That's very, very different to have. And society really has taught us, if you look a certain way, if you are a certain way, that you're not beautiful. And that's not the case. And that's where a lot of our disconnect happens within the body, within our sensuality. And it just kind of like, it keeps rolling on into its own thing.
I've watched a bunch of your Instagram reels, and you just boogieing and dancing with like all the gusto and looking like you were just having a good old time. And you're an amazing dancer. I mean, you already know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But like, I look at that and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be able to do that. But then I get a little nervous, and I'm like, do I already have to know how to dance to take your class? I mean, and maybe somebody else is having the same question, but can beginners like me who have done nothing more than just like take ballet at maybe age 5, or just like, you know, boogie a little bit in a club, like what can we do it too?
It's actually designed for people like you, Raquel, because the reason is that there is a lot of professional based things, classes, all this sort of stuff. And, you know, I have been in this dance world for so fucking long. I do love that still, but I get so much more from teaching the everyday woman, what I like to call is the everyday woman. This is the woman that, like you said, probably dances while they vacuums, or like boogies in the bathroom as they're putting their makeup on, or what, like that's the woman that I'm working with, because there is just not enough for that woman. And the fact of the matter is, we all have our own rhythms. Actually, my wife says this to me all the time. Are you sure you want to go dancing with me? You know, I have no rhythm. And I'm like, no, actually, babe, you do. You have your own rhythm, and I love your rhythm. And that's also what it's about. So the classes are beginner style, hence why we learn 4 new combos and then come back and embody it more within the second part of the month. And the way that I break it down is it's really funny, actually. I never thought I always kind of knew I'd be a dance teacher. I had a dance studio before this, an in-person dance studio pre-pandemic, where I taught a lot of kids in a safe, inclusive, diverse, non-traditional format, where like we would learn ballet to reggae music, for example, right? Like I was
cool.
just that teacher. You didn't have to
Yeah.
come in a leotard and tights. I don't care, so long as you're listening and we're doing all the things. I really couldn't give a shit. And so I kind of like continued on with that, and I guess like the way I kind of fell into teaching, like pretty hardcore into teaching, was one day I was back home in Australia and I worked as a school-age childcare director, so an OSH, before and after school care director. And someone had said to me, and not just someone, there was a lot of people, but this person had said to me, have you ever thought about being what we call in Australia primary school, which would be elementary school here, an elementary school teacher? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. No, I don't think I've got the. Anyway, the conversation continued and they ended up pretty much convincing me to go and do my degree, which then kind of let's say positively encouraged me to go down the path of really teaching. And I think that's what really opened up my eyes to what I didn't love about the dance world and how I could make it what I felt was an improved way. And that for me made sense to work with women who have never danced before, or danced when they were 5, or kitchen danced, and that's what I love. So I really kind of break the choreography down in a very digestible way, so that whether you're following along or you're missing some parts, the point is to move the body, and it doesn't matter because we're not on stage, we're not performing, and even if we were, it wouldn't matter because we're having fun and we're enjoying the movement within our body. So does that answer your question, Raquel? I feel like I did.
Yes. No, that's really good, because I get a little intimidated by it, but you just look like you're having so much fun that I want to join in. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, I can look away from being intimidated for a minute because you're having so much fun and I want to be a part of that.
Thank you. I love that so much. And I think, first of all, both of you are always invited to come along if you want to come along and do class. That's the first thing. But second thing is that the way I run the Zoom class, because it is all online and Zoom, is after check-in and check-out, apart from check-in and check-out, which is the beginning and end of class, where we really tap into like, where on the scale are you feeling physically within your body? Are you feeling like so shitty, or are you like flying on top of the world? And where are you also feeling mindset emotionally, because they both work hand in hand. So we do those check-ins. Apart from those check-ins, then the middle of the class where we're doing all the dancing, if you prefer to have your camera off, you're fucking welcome to, because the most important thing is that you're comfortable. And when you are more comfortable, you can turn your camera on. You know where we're at. I'm still going to be talking to you whether your camera's on or off. The point is to really be able to immerse in this like full-on community and family that embrace you and pick you up along the way, and we just roll with it as well.
I love that.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I really love that. Yeah.
There's a couple things I want to really touch on, because you really talked about being in the body or embodiment, which has been a huge topic this year for us, or I should say last year for us in podcasting. One of the things you said was that some women actually physically have trouble touching their body. What does that stem for? And then how does your class help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that stems from a lot of things. I think it really has a huge base from trauma, and this could be physical trauma, emotional trauma, mental trauma. I mean, it's all trauma in some way, shape, or form, where we have experienced something that's made us feel a negative reaction towards it in some way, shape, or form. And it kind of presents itself in the body in different areas. Like normally with women, we hold it within our hips or within our sternum. It's very difficult to allow ourselves to open up in that way. And so I think it really does stem from trauma, and then also societal influences and beliefs, like, and not just society, I'm talking family, I'm talking friends, I'm talking like side away comments of like, oh, you look really good today, but I wasn't sure, like these little like snickery comments from people that maybe don't feel like they're being judgy, but really are casting judgment. We kind of hold on to all of that. And as women, we can tend to be overthinkers. We can tend to overanalyze. We can tend to let that thought define and kind of like move us and navigate us forward in a direction we don't need to be going down. One of the ways that we work through this within class is through the sensuality of learning how to be comfortable with touching our bodies. And that means the movement is directed specifically to the areas that we struggle with, like hip movement and being able to touch the hips and continue to follow the hands up along the body and being okay with that without having a negative reaction towards that. We also talk a lot about it within our private community, which is hosted outside of Facebook. And it's where we really kind of do a lot of the mindset work around this. The reason we have this private community is to be able to unpack some of the things that are coming up for us. Now, not everyone is going to full blown say everything that's happened to them. You know, like it's taken me a long time to be able to talk about my sexual assault, my rape, and things like that, that also led to my trauma and inability to sensually connect to myself. And then there will be people in the group that completely just let it all fly and have no problem. The point is to be able to unpack together and know that we aren't alone, and know that maybe my experience may not be exactly the same as yours, but there may be things that you can pull out and start to shift the narrative within the mindset as well as the physical portion. It's kind of like this bridging of the gap. And then typically the songs that I choose for Sensual Grooves have some sort of meaning. For Sensual Grooves, they typically have something that we're working on. Like sometimes it's very hip focused. And so we're really talking about, like, for example, next week we're doing River by Bishop Briggs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It was a huge trending audio on TikTok, and it really, she talks about some of that trauma within the body. And so we're going to be opening up through the chest a lot with that sort of choreography. Oh, wow. So I'm choosing songs that also make us think, because we're listening to the lyrics, we're listening to it over. I'm teaching to the lyrics, I'm teaching to these sorts of things. And when I'm teaching, I'm also explaining. For example, think about a time where you felt unsafe. This is where we're pulling out from here, right? And so it's really kind of working through that versus, yeah, it's all well and good to learn the choreography and the steps. That's fantastic, great. But again, we're not a professional class. There is a whole different concept and focus around this whole community.
It's so interesting that my whole reaction to this, because when you're doing like up your body, I have sort of a physical reaction to that.
Yeah, tell me.
And I realize that that's my trauma, and I definitely can feel it in I always think of this as my heart center, my chest. I'm pointing to my chest for people who are listening. I also have been doing very similar work with yoga, where we're talking about movement in the hips, movement in the heart center.
I have an example for you, but you guys go first.
No, go ahead.
I was thinking about that, Jennifer. So that's great that you brought it up. So
I love that Raquel and I pointing to the screen like, yes.
Yeah, go. Everybody go.
So that's a really good point, because actually I felt a lot of release within my body when I was doing yoga quite frequently. And I'm going to give you an example here, because this was something that also opened my eyes to where the trauma was being held in my body, and therefore where it was held in other women's bodies. Because what was happening was I was back in Australia and I was waiting for my green card, and there was a whole fuck up with my paperwork over here and whatever, it is what it is. But I had to go home and was waiting for it to come back. And as I was working in this school-age childcare director role that I was telling you about, my shifts were that I would work morning and afternoon, and I'd have a bit of a gap in the day. And so at that time, I was working about a 45-minute drive from where I lived, and I just wasn't fucking driving back and forth. I just wasn't doing it. Also, the location where I was working was super close to the beach. And if you know anything about Australian beaches, you know how beautiful they are. Sandy, white sand, beautiful blue waters, warm, like, well, and so I was like, you know,
oh my God.
Yeah, right? Like heaven, divine.
Yeah.
So let's just go hang out at the beach whenever we can. And along the way, I came across a yoga studio. Her house was there, and then her studio was built in the back. And I started to go and do yoga every single day. Now, even though I'm a dancer and I've been dancing forever, things like yoga and Pilates and all that sort of stuff is still challenging for myself as well, because my body hasn't been trained in that way, right? And so when I was going to yoga, I was going in the morning classes, and we're doing all of our yoga, totally beginner yoga, all the things. And I noticed by the end of yoga, I was crying my fucking eyes out.
Yeah, me too.
Oh my God. And I could not fucking understand it. I was like, hold on. Also, something you both may not know about me, and definitely your listeners, is that as an Enneagram 8, I tend to used to hold my cards very close to me. So I would not be vulnerable. I would shut that shit down, any emotions. So the ability to then go to yoga and cry my eyes out was like mind-blowing for me. So one day after about 3 months, because I also was a person that was like, pick up my shit and run out the room because I'm crying and I'm so embarrassed and no one else is crying. So why am I crying? And all of these thoughts are going through my mind. I pull the yoga teacher aside and I say, Monique, I am struggling. Like, why the fuck am I leaving class like this? Like, I want to feel good and I'm not feeling good yet. And she said to me, a lot of the movement that we do in yoga is centered to hips and sternum, and specifically opening up the chest in the sternum, like when you're doing, oh my gosh, cobras and things like that. And what's happening there is if you're holding trauma there, the way that your body is releasing is after opening it up and being able to breathe and bring air in, right? It's bringing up the emotion and you're triggered. And she said, don't worry, it'll pass. I promise you. I'm like, dude, it does not feel like it's going to pass. So I don't know. I kept going. By about month 6, I remember the day I walked out and I was not in tears, and she came up and hugged me. She said, see, I told you, you kept coming, and see, you're working through the trauma without even realizing it. So to back onto what you said, Jennifer, it's very much like that, where we are really trying to find the spots that we're holding this trauma, releasing and working through it, because like life is too short and we don't need to be holding on to all this negative shit. Unfortunately, we do. And unfortunately, we have experiences that do hold themselves within the body. But then the way to kind of embody ourselves and moving forward and grow is to be able to work through that. And part of the trauma being stuck in the body is in my opinion, us not being ready to deal with it at that time, right? Shoving it down, protecting ourselves at that point, because that's all we can do. We're just coping with it. So when we're getting to the point of being ready to and willing to work through the trauma and open it up, it's a whole, almost like a rebirth, to be honest with you. It's a whole sort of rebirth as you work through it again to release. And not to say that just because we're releasing it, it won't come back or it won't resurface again. It's just that we're getting better at understanding the triggers. We're getting better at understanding how to manage. We're getting better at understanding how to cope with it and how to also support ourselves along the way. Because trauma healing, in my opinion, has always had a really like hard as fuck mentality around it. And yes, it is hard. But it can also be playful and it can also be fun. And it can also, and as you guys are looking at me like, what the fuck does she mean playful and fun?
No,
but I'm glad you're saying that though, because all we ever hear about healing, especially if it's from like big T trauma, like assault or rape or childhood experiences, anything like that, all we hear about is it's hard. You're going to be weighed down. It's going to be traumatic to get over it, blah, blah, blah. Be in a safe space so that you can, all of that. But we never hear, or at least I never hear about, but there can be parts of that healing that aren't horrible, that you can dance through it. You can,
absolutely,
you can, it isn't always going to break you to remake you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really great way of looking at it, Raquel. I mean, I think that when we have this concept or this understanding that, or we're being told that trauma is always hard as fuck to deal with, does it not make you less inclined to actually want to deal with your trauma?
I don't want to do it.
I mean, like,
no thanks.
No, thank you. No, right? So it's also that idea of like, how can we tap into, yes, there will be moments that are hard. Of course, it's trauma. That's what's there, right? But how can we tap into healing in also the opposite way, to make it fun, to make it enjoyable, to explore in a different way, and to get to a point where, yeah, you know what? I can move my hips again, which I couldn't. I mean, like, think about it. Have you ever seen men, dancers, move their hips?
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
Like, I always used to grow up thinking, fuck, why can men move their hips way better than women can? And it was really something that stumped me. And after I was talking to a lot of men about it, I realized that they didn't hold any fucking trauma. And if they did hold trauma, it wasn't there in their hips. So their hip movement is fluid. It's able to do what it needs to do, circulate, whatever it's doing, right? Whereas for women, because it's like a standstill, it's like a no-go zone. It's especially if you've experienced sexual assault, rape, or something like that, you're not inclined to want to touch your hips. I mean, there's a lot there, right? And so the idea of having fun with it is something that is, I think you're right, Raquel, not talked about as much, but is totally possibly there. There's moments that are fun.
So the other layer to your post that really spoke to me, and probably you too, Raquel, although I don't like to speak for you, you're doing the sensual grooves with your group of women so that it's okay to touch ourselves, or we learn to touch ourselves and feel comfortable with that. But then you also said, and how do you expect a man to be able to touch you in the way, or a partner, I should say a partner be able to touch you in a way that you would enjoy if you don't even know how to touch yourself in a way that you would enjoy. And I think for many of us women, those type of subjects were just plain taboo. Like, don't touch yourself. Don't think that you want your partner to touch you.
Right.
You know, and when you said that about the men swaying their hips, my first thought was because they're allowed to. They're allowed to do it, and we're not.
There is that permissive side. Yes, 100%.
Right. If we went to a club and danced like that, it's automatically assumed it's sexual.
Yeah.
So therefore you're making yourself unsafe on the dance floor, you little hussy.
Yes.
You little hussy.
I'm just saying that's how I felt. Like I used to go dancing with my girls all the time, but if it got a little too free, suddenly we had a circle of dudes that we didn't necessarily want.
Well, and you're very right, because then that becomes unwanted attention. And really what you're trying to do is just enjoy yourself. And unfortunately, that is also a very societal thing. Like, I mean, I think a lot of us that grew up in the clubbing days, I mean, I don't really know how many, I mean, I'm turning 36 in a month. I don't know how many youngins younger than me are still going clubbing. I don't know. I mean, but I grew up in a clubbing world in Australia where we would club till 7 a.m. in the morning. I mean, like fully intense, right? But there were so many instances that I remember a lot of my friends feeling very uncomfortable and unsafe because of the unwanted attention. Like, okay, you're in the club and you're dancing, maybe you're bootying, whatever you're doing, right? And then all of a sudden there's a dude behind you and you're like,
exactly.
What are you doing? Well, here is because I know this is going to be a video as well, right? I'm going to show you what I do when this happens in the club, even with my wife around. I am going to back this up here. So I'm dancing, right? And then say there's a dude that comes behind me. I fully back up and push him out. And all because I got used to, for my friends, having to help them through navigating the unwanted attention. And I just don't give a shit. I was just like, dude, back the fuck up. No one wants you here. Like, I mean, like in this space, in my space right now, go and do your dancing over there. So Jennifer, you're very right in saying what you said about the unwanted attention. And to kind of take it back to like the idea of being in the club or going out dancing and being afraid to then do whatever you want within your body and dance, and then have this unwanted attention, it then calls to mind the idea of, well, and I know this is going to be triggering, so I'm just going to warn everyone, well, she was asking for it.
Exactly.
She was asking for it. And
she was moving a certain way and she was inviting it.
Yes. Exactly. And that's just not the case. And for me, the problem then comes down to, well, what the fuck are you all teaching the men or the partners?
Yes.
It's not always men. Like, it's not always men. Let's be real, right? Yeah. So what are you also, like, how are you raising your kids? How is this even still a thing where we're talking about, I can't move my body in a certain way. I can't wear a certain piece of clothing because I'm worried that you're then going... This needs, in my opinion, needs to change. This exchange
absolutely
for women,
100%.
And for me, all of that, although it's not the big T trauma that you were talking about, Raquel, it's those little traumas day after day after day, saying you went to a club, you got this attention because you danced, because maybe you wore a skirt, maybe just because you were there and you were alive and you had a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Those are all little traumas that add up, that, in my opinion, have women sort of disembody because 100%. Of the consistent.
Absolutely. And it's really a shame, because it means that we can't be who we want to be without feeling that something is going to come back on us in some way, shape, or form, some sort of unwanted something, right? And it can come back in various forms. Yeah, it's very true. And Jennifer, I want to then like back this on to your point about the video that you saw that I shared where I had talked about how can you expect your partner to touch up on you if you don't know how you like to be touched up on. And that was a very surface level share. I haven't gone deeper yet with that, which I plan to. It really comes down to like, let's back it up, right? We're in the club or we're doing our thing. We can't move our bodies a certain way. We can't dress a certain way. We can't be who we want to be because we're afraid of this unwanted attention. That then trickles down to your sensuality, your sex life, what you're comfortable with, because we have this narrative, this dialogue happening in our head subconsciously all the time. It obviously then stops things happening where you want them to happen, with who you want them to happen with, when you're safe. And so one of the things that is really, really important, I think, in the exploration and the idea of sensual grooves or sensuality is when you feel comfortable to touch up on your body and you're with a sexual partner, doesn't matter of the gender, you're with a sexual partner, you're going to be less, let's say, flinchy of where they might be touching you, because you are aware of what you're comfortable with. You know what you like, you know what you don't like, and you will get to a space of being able to communicate that. I don't like it when you touch me here instead. I prefer this sort of a touch. I like soft touch. No, I like it, whatever the case may be, right? It's all about understanding what feels good to you, because also as women, owning the sexual power, I mean, I grew up with my mum, who is no longer with us, who passed away when I was 18. And I remember her telling me as a kid, as a young teenager, Santina, and at that time I wasn't out, so let's also preface that. So this is very male-centered forward. But when you are with a man, if he wants to have sex with you, you lay there and you take it. This was what she was raised with, right? So she didn't know any better. So
well, that's what she was taught.
That's what she was taught. Exactly.
Yeah.
You lay there, you take it. Also, I come from a traditional Italian family. So there's also that side of things. So it was very much like when the man wants to be pleased, you do what you need to do. That's it. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter about any of that. So to talk also about the taboo-ness of sexuality, the sexual power for the women, and then the sensuality, a lot of us have grown up with this sort of like concept, right? And this idea of like, well, you actually as a woman don't have a space in the bedroom, outside of the bedroom and in the bedroom, to own your sexual power, what feels good, what you like, because you're there to please the partner. And that's just not fucking
so heavy.
True. It is so heavy, and it's not fair, because at the end of the day, we are complex humans that also have needs that need to be met. And part of the embodiment is understanding, exploring, and really knowing what feels good to us, because we're all so different, and then being able to communicate that in a safe way where you're not looked down upon, where it's not like, what the fuck do you mean? I mean, you're supposed to be here. There is a lot there to unpack, but it really does, part of sensuality and connecting back to that leads to this sort of idea within the bedroom for you as a woman, right? As a badass woman who's owning their fucking power.
A major frustration to me about this whole topic of sexuality, it's always been to me like the double-edged sword. You're not supposed to be a sexual being as a woman, but as soon as you get in the bedroom, you're supposed to be able to rock that shit out. And like, if you're not supposed to like it, how are you supposed to go from pure to the purity culture? How are you supposed to go from this pure demure being to then be in this whore in the bedroom that's rocking it out and making everyone happy? Like, how do you
listen?
A lady in the street in what is it, like a whore in the sheets
or something?
Like, how are we supposed to do that?
And if you do that, then you're going to be shamed for it. Like, how'd you get so good at that? Where'd those skills come from? What kind of girl are you?
100%. But again, that comes down to society and what they're teaching the other partner. And let's be real, within my own experience, it's typically with men that this happens with versus women. At least the women that I have been with have been part of that exploration with me. It's been a very, very different sexual experience, let's say, and sensual experience than it has been with the men that I was with. And so I completely understand what you're saying, because it's like this it's like this one rule for me, one rule for you kind of thing. And then
Yeah.
when you're hitting the other rule, and I'm sorry, I'm not actually okay with that. Like, let's fucking take it back. But here's what I want to say to that, Jennifer, is are we allowing the partner to own our sexual experience, or are we going to allow ourselves to own
No, damn it. No, damn it, we're not.
Because listen, I also grew up with the idea that women were not sexual beings. We were not
Right.
sexual
Yeah.
beings at all.
Yeah.
Like women, not at all, right? So for me also, that was a bit of a breakthrough, working through and being like, actually, I do enjoy having sex with my partner when it's in the space that I want it to be in, when it, you know, all of those things are lining up. And so the idea of you have to be this pure woman outside and then this whore in the bed is
Yeah.
also such an oxymoron, because it's like, dude, like, how about you? Are you being pure outside and then a whore in the bedroom with me too? I mean, like, let's be real about this, right?
No, they just get to be whores.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Lucky them.
No, I honestly, like, it sounds like I'm man bashing, but I actually think that this is a real problem for men too, that they're just as confused by this as we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whatever intimate partner, whatever your background was when you were growing up, what your mom told you, what your dad told you, what you read, what movies you saw, all the movies were about, you know, like the rom-coms were like about that kind of girl, chase and destroy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going off on a tangent.
No, I think you're so right, because like, but here's the thing. Yes, sorry. No to not, we're not male bashing, totally get that. But yes to the idea of like, when does that change? Like at what point for the typical stereotypical male that we experience this from, right? Because not all men are this way either, right? But
right, of course not.
Male that this is being experienced from, at what point does that change? Like, where does that change start? Like, obviously, parents are doing the best they can do and they're raising their kids the best that they can. I mean, we are in a world where things are hopefully different, but you don't know. There's also cultural differences, heritage, you know, there's a lot of other things that come into play, nature versus nurture, et cetera, et cetera. And so at what point does that change happen? Like, it has to happen with him or them, right? Because if they're not willing to make a change, if that's all they know, and if that's what they're happy with, there is no change that's going to happen apart from the female or the other partner putting their foot down and saying like, yo, like, this is going to change. Like, this is not going to work for me, right? Because remembering that sexuality and sensuality is an exchange. It's an even exchange of energy. So if you're showing up with me or whatever, you're showing up, sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that, but if you're showing up and you're giving me all this energy and I'm not bringing the energy through, there is a gap. We need to be able to bridge that gap to be able to have this connection together and enjoy the sensuality, the sexuality, whatever is happening together on a neutral ground, not one above the other.
I mean, I do think that that is one of the issues that we're seeing at large on social media with a lot of groups like incels, for example, because they aren't willing to figure out, you know, women are refusing to date them and they're not figuring it out that maybe you need to change. One thing I wanted to touch on briefly, if you don't mind, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. You mentioned that your mom died when you were 18.
Yep.
How did that affect what you're doing now? How did that lead up to who you became?
Yeah, I actually really appreciate this question, and I'm a very open book, so there's nothing off limits for me. So my mom had gotten a very late diagnosis of pancreatic cancer when I was just finishing high school and about to turn 18. It was one where she was given, I think, 6 months, and then based on her decisions of how she wanted to deal with her treatment, it was 6 months, pretty much, give or take a couple of days to the day. As you can imagine, losing a loved one and then losing someone young. I had brothers that I had to take care of. I am from a very strict Italian household. So for me, the expectation was, you're the only girl. You cook, you clean, maybe go to university, maybe have a career, but your job is to take care of your brothers now that your mom's not there, and your father. And I kind of went to blows, I'm not going to lie, with my family, and specifically my grandmother or my nonna, when I was like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, he can take care of himself. He's a 50-year-old man. I'm not fucking doing his shit for him. I'm sorry. And my brothers were younger than me, so that was a little bit different. They needed more of a female figure, right? So then it kind of came about that I had decided that I was going to stay in Australia and do my thing to be there for my brothers until the youngest one turned 18. Because at that point in Australia, that's typically when you go to university and you're kind of an adult and doing your own thing. And then I thought, that's when I'm going to do something for me. So when I was 18 and when I had just lost my mum, I'd gotten a scholarship to one of the biggest, most well-known performing arts schools in Australia and the third in the world. And I turned it down because I wasn't sure what was happening with my mum, right? And I had just said to them, hey, just like, can I wait? I really don't know what's happening. And they let me do that. But then by the time my mum passed, and then I was taking care of my brothers, it was like, this is something I have to put on hold for right now. Within that, the exploration then became of kind of unpacking everything I'd learned from my mum about sensuality, sexuality, the woman's body, the role, the this, the that. That really started to happen from that. When I came over to America, I originally came over as an au pair, which is like a live-in nanny. And I started my journey in Philadelphia for 10 months, and then I came to Seattle. And I never had the intention of staying in America. But when I came to Seattle, and I had 2 months left, I found this amazing family that I was loving the experience with that I did not have in Philadelphia. And then I decided to extend and stay. And within that time, I met my now wife, and the rest is history. And that's just how it went. But the way that it really like impacted my journey per se is it really initiated the start of the exploration for me. And this exploration has been happening for years. She passed when I was 18 and I'm almost 36. So it's been happening a very long time, and it's been happening slowly, sometimes fast, sometimes plateaus, sometimes it's like, what the fuck is happening? I don't know. Like, it's all of these emotions that you're working through. And it also kind of speared me to really create the communities that I have now, because when I was younger, I didn't have that. When I was a young adult dealing with my mum's passing, dealing with all these other things, I didn't have that. When I was still in my 20s, I still didn't have that. Like, it was really difficult for me to find these communities of empowerment, these communities of modeling, I guess, how women could be and where women could go without the emphasis of society and the rules that they're putting on us, and being able to break stereotypes. And that's really where it kind of all started to shape. And I was like, I know I need to do something about this, because I never fucking had this, and I need this, and other women need this. And so I think that's how it kind of impacted my journey.
When you talk about your mom and some of the messages she gave you, I feel like you have a peace about it, not like an anger that she told you that about sex. You have that's what she knew, that's what she taught me. Going through what you've gone through with your work, has that allowed you to have a peace with your mom?
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate that from someone who's an outsider listening to the story, because at times I have felt like that's not the case. And I know that I really did have quite a bit of resentment towards my mum earlier on in my journey, about a lot of things, like, for example, coming out and knowing that at the time she may not have accepted who I was and my wife and all those sorts of things. Also understanding the culture I grew up in and all that sort of stuff. But I would say there were many times that I did resent her for teaching me what I was taught, because that's how I modeled my sexual life, or me and who I was, because I didn't know any different. But then it really came down to, as I've really gone through a lot of personal growth, a lot of inner work, and like putting myself in this space, I think that's something that's different about me and unique, is that I am someone to put myself in really uncomfortable spaces to work through something like the resentment that I felt around those statements and how I was raised. So going through that inner work, I think, has really helped me to be at peace and to understand that, yeah, she did the best she could. She did what she knew. And also when she passed, I was 18. So who knows, maybe when I was older, if she was still around, maybe that would have changed. And so really, I guess, understanding the complexity and the layers involved has helped me have peace, and also knowing that I can change my narrative, and I am changing my narrative, and that's okay too. Like, that was her narrative, that's what she knew, but now this is my narrative, and this is what I know, and this is what I'm sharing.
Kind of tied on to what you just said, Santina, you talk about your self energy and that your energy is changing, or that it goes through changes from time to time.
Yeah.
What you're saying about, the way that your feelings about your mom and what she taught you, and sort of unlearning a lot of that, and relearning and reteaching yourself, that all sounds like those were energy shifts that happened for you. And it sounds like from some recent posts that there's another shift that's starting to happen for you,
Yeah.
that your self energy, your vibe, as you call it, it's there and it's coming out, and it comes out in different ways, and it can shift and it can change. And can you talk about that? When you started posting about that, that just made me feel so positive for you, because it sounds like big things are coming. I can't wait to hear about it. Like, it just sounds like I'm just excited for you, because it sounds like big things are on the horizon.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Raquel. Yeah, I agree. I would say that there is a lot within those examples that you gave of any energy shifts within, because like when we're really kind of, I would say, holding on to something, holding on to a story, it brings a different type of energy, right? Whether you notice it, whether you don't, whether you're aware, whether you're not, it's there. And I think it's through the awareness and the acknowledgement that then you're able to work through this shift. So that the idea of personal growth and inner work and inner dialogue and all of that sort of like everything that everyone throws around words wise, right? The idea of going through this is working through an energy shift. There are moments like I'm not sure, you may have seen my story on Christmas Eve. I made a story and I was on my Instagram and I was crying. And this story, I was crying because I'd gone out with my wife and we were doing some errands, and I was really having a really energetically difficult day. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I had no idea what was going on. And all of a sudden, she's out in the store and I'm in the car and I'm fucking crying. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? All right. So I took a story and I took a video or a photo, I can't remember, because I wanted to share about it, because I realized that it had to do with grief. And it had to do with the fact that Christmas Eve was always a holiday that we celebrated, a tradition we celebrated with my mom. And it was always one where my mom would invite the whole fucking family. I mean, like shitload of people. And we would have homemade chicken schnitzel and Italian sauce. I mean, like you can just imagine the Italian feast, right? For the longest time, literally up until last year, I was still carrying on that tradition here. Last year, my wife and I decided that it was time, because of a lot of these energy shifts that I'd been working through, that it was time to kind of recreate what that looked like for us. And I wasn't ready to let go of that until this past year. So the grief hit me in the car when I started crying, and I shared about it because grief is one of those energy shifts that unfortunately comes back and forth, but it's also an opportunity to acknowledge how far you've come, where you're at, and to understand all the concepts and the pieces that are coming together. So my grief that hit on Christmas Eve last year is completely different to the grief that would have hit years ago, completely different to 18-year-old me who didn't cry and was like the strong ass woman holding the family together and all of, right? So it's completely different and takes different shape. Within that, I would say probably from about, I want to say mid-November, this new energy shift, like you had mentioned, this new kind of vibe has been coming through. And I want to say it's probably one that has just really opened my eyes up to just being more vulnerable. And I think that's the most important thing for me, because it has been so hard for me to be vulnerable. And it's something I wanted to work on, because I knew that with the vulnerability that I can bring through, with the stories that I can share, with my experiences, you can take what you want and you can leave what you want. It doesn't matter. But if I'm sharing it, it may just help one woman who felt the way that I did. It may just help one young teenager coming up in social media that feels or is being bullied or something like that. It may just help them, just help one person with whatever they're going through. And I would say that's where that big energy burst is and shift is coming. And also, I'm not sure where else it's leading me. We'll see. I'm excited,
right.
But I don't really know. But that's kind of where it's been going.
I have so much love for you right now.
Yeah,
I'm just like,
no
Thank
kidding.
you, Jennifer.
So much love for you.
Thank you.
No kidding. Well, Jennifer, it's funny that you say that, because literally, Santina, as you were talking, just seeing all this energy that you are just exuding and literally feeling it, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm just sitting here just thinking, oh my
Soaking it
God,
in.
the fact that we're feeling this much energy from you, Santina, over Zoom,
Mhm.
I cannot imagine how amazing it would be to literally be in the same space with you and
Oh,
feel your energy in person. Like I
thank
think
you.
that would just be this amazing experience to just be in space with you and
Thank
feel
you.
all of this positivity and energy and goodness and love that just is just emitting from you.
Thank you so much. I'm sending so much love here. It's like I'm spitting out glitter and
Thank
unicorn
you.
out to the so much love.
I receive all of that. I
Yes,
receive
thank
it.
you.
I
And I
received it.
think I want to add on and say thank you so much for sharing that with me. That honestly means the world, because I have been through such a different, unique journey. And I think we all, we all have journeys and we all have stories. I think it's very much about the perspective that you take and the look that you take, and knowing that I am going to be sharing as well on social media the real look at also what it means to go through this. It's not just always like, yes, I am a huge energy person. Yes, I'm outgoing, out there. I'm also very introverted, and I'm also very like need my downtime, and I'm also going through my own things too. And so I believe that that needs to be shared just as much as the great energy, because there has been on social media a very fake perspective shared from so many people where the real stuff, the real shit is not tapped into. And the fact that is we all go through real shit. I think that's just part of it as well.
Yeah.
Something key that you just brought up a few minutes ago, you said, I can't remember your exact words, but you said it's part of the story. I'm also going through mother grief. My mom is in the process of dying right now.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And I'm
you so
sorry
much love.
for the loss of your mother as well. And grief is such a journey. It's ever changing. What I've realized is sometimes the things that happen, the traumas that happened, they are what they are. It's the story that we carry with us that causes the trauma. And if we can at some point say, hey, this is a story, it happened, but I'm not carrying that story with me anymore. The story is, yes, my mother told me this, and that was her truth. It was her truth because her mother told it to her, and her mother told it to her.
Yeah.
And now I'm not carrying that story forward anymore.
Yeah.
There's something in this healing about realizing that the story, the trauma, we re-traumatize ourselves, and the way out can be what you're talking about in a beautiful way, the movement and learning to re-embody ourselves.
Honestly,
so I think I'm going to take your class, man.
Yeah, please.
I need to learn how to do this without being uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, no, you probably will feel uncomfortable. Let's be real at certain points.
No,
but
I said I need to learn how to do it without being uncomfortable.
That's the other thing. I'm very honest. We all know that. There's no bullshitting here. I think that you hit the nail on the head with a lot of what you said there, Jennifer. And from someone who's lost their mom to someone else who's going through it, one of the hardest things I think is to let go of, like you said, a lot of these stories, thoughts, etc. And also to, gosh, the process of going from, or in the period that you're kind of in right now, Jennifer, right, of getting ready to lose your mom, is there is so much within yourself there that you're probably wishing you and wanting to do and all of that sort of stuff. And I would say, like, as much as you can, treasure every moment that you can, because in the moments where they're going through whatever, and I don't know the full story, but whatever they're going through, I know that for my mum with her cancer, it was very aggressive and very quick. And so for her, it was enjoying the moments when I could, getting the love and the support and the wisdom and everything that I could from her, because I knew I wasn't going to have it forever, and really like treasuring those moments and understanding that they're going through a whole process themselves, right? And so giving space to go through that process. So like, another friend of mine is also unfortunately going through a space of losing their parent, and they had said, "Pen, she's being such a fucking bitch. And I was like, dude,
Yes.
I understand, excuse it, but I was like, I know, and I understand, and I hear you, and I want to add to you that they're going through such a process within their own body as well. And so it's not a reflection on you, it's just how they're able to deal with it and cope right now. And you've got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, but also treasure the moments you can. And so one of the things that I just want to leave you guys with, which is something I talk about quite a bit, is when it comes to stories, having stories being held in our bodies, they're only going to have as much power as we give them. So if you give them 100% power, they're naturally going to, like you said, kind of come back, re-trigger, re-traumatize. Now, the thing is that, like, I'm not sure that I'm a huge believer that you're always healed from your trauma. I know a lot of people say this, you're healed from your trauma. It's never, I'm not a huge believer of that, because I believe that as complex humans, as we go along our life, things will trigger us. We just get better at managing and coping and understanding, right? Acknowledging, being aware, etc. One thing that I really have learned that has helped me, Jennifer, with the loss of my mom, because there's been a lot of work there. And I mean, I've gone to therapy and like, there's been a lot, right? One thing that helped me was when I realized, and not just with my mom, specifically with my rape, was that XYZ, you put whatever it is in XYZ, doesn't define you. So for example, my rape doesn't define me. My mom's words don't define me. Whatever it might be doesn't define you. And yes, it's kind of at first a little superficial to say because you're still diving in, but when you can truly tap into understanding that that was someone else's path, that was someone else's story, etc., even if it happened to you like my rape did to me, and like what we were talking about earlier about like, oh, you asked for it and all of that, that was a lot that I had to work through, because at the time it was after a performance of Chicago, of a theater show where I was wearing next to nothing back in the day, right? Like a little bit. It really came to understand that someone's reaction, someone's response, someone's choice that they made isn't necessarily the choice I made, and I'm not going to allow it to define me, because I'm so much better than that, and I have so much more in me than that. And that XYZ doesn't define me statement has been something that I've carried through every time, and it's something that allows me to start to really tap into the acknowledgement and the awareness of what might be coming up for me, and then start to unpack and continue to do all the things. And so I want to leave you guys with that, and your listeners, XYZ doesn't define me, because when you can allow it to release and not hold the power, I mean, you're unstoppable. I mean, that's it. You're unstoppable.
Santina, thank you so much for saying that. Just even in my own immediate circle, friends of mine are going through things, the breakup of a relationship or a divorce, or going through losing a parent. That's not the end of your story. There's so much more to each of these people, right? It's not just, oh, this is so-and-so, this is the thing that happened to her, and so this is all that she is.
Correct.
For you to say that, I hope that the people that need to hear that hear it, because hopefully, well, not just hopefully, because you're proof of it, that can give them some hope and show them they'll get through that. There's more on the other side.
100%, Nicole. I was about to say, I can see you're tearing up there, and I'm sending you so much love. Please know, like, feel this virtual hug coming through to you. And I just want to back onto everything that you said there and say that at the same time of understanding that it doesn't define us, and at the same time of understanding that we're going to move through it because there's more for us, it also still needs to hold space, and as it's part of the story, and it's not going to be discounted. And when you can get to a space of being able to talk about something with the tears, without the tears, with peace, whatever it might be, when you can get to the space of being able to openly talk about something, I think that's when I really noticed the biggest shift for me energetically within my healing. It's there as a part of my story, but it's not my whole story. And it still needs to hold what it needs to hold, because it's brought me to where I am today, right? It's a part of it, but it doesn't need to be the whole thing. And you can completely shift the narrative. Like I said, it may always bring things up. I was crying on Christmas Eve, right? Like, I mean, all of that sort of stuff. Of course it does, because we're human and we're complex and we're complicated, but that's also what makes us beautiful, because we're able to feel all of that.
What a beautiful conversation. Thank you too, both of you.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you guys. I feel lots of love in my heart right now.
Yes,
Me
I
too.
hope you feel
It's because
lots
we
of
opened
love.
up our heart centers.
We did.
Exactly. Open up your
Yeah.
chest and your heart center. There you go. Also,
Yes,
remember, this is a very
received
vulnerable
it.
position. So give yourself
Yeah.
kindness and grace as you open this up.
Exactly.
because it is.
Exactly. We're just receiving all the love. I love love. I'm so glad that we have gotten to know you a little bit, and I hope that we continue to get to know you even better, and that everybody else gets to work with you and know you, because you have so much to give and to teach us, and thank you for being on the planet.
Thank you. You're going to make me cry now. Thank you so much. And the feeling is very, very mutual. I'm very looking forward to continuing the conversation with you both outside of podcast world and just getting to know you both more. Thank you for having me on the podcast, and thank you for giving me a space to share, because that's the impact I want to make. I want to impact other women. I want to share so they know they're not alone. And you've both given me a platform to do that. So thank you very much for the conversation, the love, the feel good vibes, all of it. The feeling is very, very mutual.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Santina.
Yep.
Oh, I cried again.
It's okay. It's okay. You're feeling all your feels.
Oh.
Good. We watched her Instagram. We knew she was going to be powerful, but I also am just blown away. So much wisdom and beauty and strength and compassion. And I love that she rocks it out. I seriously, when she did the shimmy, I had a reaction to that, and I realized, oh, I've got some work to do.
Oh, same. Like, I absolutely want to take her classes, because there's so much that I realized that I'm holding on to that's not mine to carry.
Yeah. Throw that shit away.
Hey, why am I carrying all this shit around? This isn't mine. This is society. I gotta let this shit go, right? The way that she moves, and there's just this energy and this freedom in her movement when she's dancing. And I'm like, I want that. I want some of that. I can imagine doing it, with her as my guide.
Her work is amazing. Beautiful.
So good. So
Yeah.
good.
So good. So good. I feel like dancing.
Dancing. Okay.
I love you, Raquel.
I love you too, Jennifer.
Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.